Oscar?
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, may we poll, please, for another, or postpone for another council meeting, item number C, 7C?
Okay.
And if with your permission, if I could just explain why we want to do that. This is, as we discussed in the budget process, an amendment to the contract with the Taos Sports Alliance for them to take full control of Echo Park, its maintenance, as well as its promotion and its programming, and which was part of their original contract. And so the reason we put it on here is because we were, in essence, putting into effect one of the clauses in the original contract that up until now we hadn't executed or taken into put into action. And in negotiating with them, we thought that this was the $60,000 was the amount that we thought would be reasonable to put into the contract. But looking at it 2 and 3 times now, we just think that just for the sake of transparency, et cetera, that we'd like to actually go through a whole bidding process for this, and so that that way we can come back and assure you that locally that this process has gone through that vetting process. We've got the best bids and got the best prices there, and so and with that, be able to then come back to you with this amendment, bringing that contract into the fold of TSA. So the idea is then that we will put this out for a bid. We will also invite TSA to bid for that. The bid, when it comes back, we will make sure and include in that contract language that says that contract will then be reverted to TSA, and by that means be able to assure the public that we got the best possible price on this work.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Abate.
Number one, Oscar, why the sudden change? It's on the agenda, it went through the process, and now at the 11th hour I'm seeing a sudden change. I don't understand.
No good explanation for that, council member. It's just after having looked at it 2 and 3 times there, I just myself could not satisfy the question I had there, that if we were to be asked if that's the best price that we could get, if we were to have done it or we were to bid it separately, that I was not going to be able to answer that question satisfactorily, at least to my satisfaction. So in order to be able to assure you and the public that we got the best possible price, I want to just go ahead and take responsibility for that and just say, look, we'd like to bid it out and then bring it back to you as an amendment to TSA's contract, but after it's having been bid.
And Oscar and Mr. Mayor, I fully support doing the proper due diligence and the transparency, but again, this went through the process, and now at the 11th hour, with folks here attending for the purpose, we're just like pulling the plug out of nowhere. So I don't think that's appropriate.
Okay, any other comments or questions? I believe also we need to make sure that this falls within the confines of professional services. And that's the reason why I believe that we're looking at, from a legal perspective, maintenance and park and ground maintenance should go through an RFP, correct? Through a bidding process? Bidding process, I'm sorry.
Well, we strongly prefer that based on council direction and regarding openness and transparency. The attorney's office would prefer that. This could be referred to as scope creep in a contract, which we really try to avoid.
Scope what?
Creep.
Mission creep?
Mission. Okay.
But Mr. Mayor, Brian, and Oscar, that's fine, but it should have never made it to the agenda if those were the concerns by staff, by legal, by the managers. So I personally, as one council member, feel embarrassed it's on the agenda, and now we're pulling it at the 11th hour. It's unacceptable.
You're correct, council member. I take full responsibility for this. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll pull that item. What is the pleasure of the council on the rest of the agenda?
Move to approve agenda as amended.
Mr. Mayor?
Is a motion, is there a
I'll second.
second, motion, a second, under discussion?
Under discussion, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to vote yes for the approval of the agenda, but I want the record to show that I'm not supporting pulling item C.
Okay. Is there any other comments, questions, council? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Next, we'll go to the Citizens Forum. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak under the Citizens Forum? Sir, Brad, welcome to our meeting.
Thanks, sir. Good evening, Councilman and Mr. Mayor, Oscar. I really do appreciate the opportunity to just very briefly, I'm going to wear two hats. The first hat is as a board member of the Taos Association of Bed and Breakfast Inns and a board member of the New Mexico Bed and Breakfast Association. Just wanted to update you guys. The legislature passed a new law allowing B&Bs to apply for a special bed and breakfast dispensing license. In the past, if we served a guest a glass of wine, it was a 4th-degree felony. It's been going on for years, but the associations put a stop to it a number of years ago, and now for $100 and 20-plus pages worth of application, we get to submit and ask the state for permission to get B&B server permits. Next week, I'm going to go down to Santa Fe and get take the little class, and at some point in the future, I'll be a resident agent or something like that. But I did want to read one little section here. Once the director has reviewed the application and the recommendation, if all is correct, your application will be forwarded to the local governing body. So in other words, kind of a heads up to you guys, get ready. There's going to be a slew of B&Bs coming to you asking for these special licenses. It allows us to serve 2 glasses of wine or 2 beers, and that's it. Hopefully, there won't be any problems associated with any of the B&Bs obtaining these permits from any of the local agencies. You look at a place like mine, the back parking lot, the staff parking lot of Enos Garcia School is there. Several of the B&Bs are right next to churches. That's just something that if it's going to be a problem, let's talk about it. And hopefully it won't be, because it's just a couple of glasses of wine. It's typically, we can't charge them for it either, by the way. It has to be included in the price of a room. Something that's coming up.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Gonzalez.
Brad, with regards to that, the concern that I have, and I'm sure we're a little premature with discussion, but if they are within proximity to schools and churches, then we're going to open up floodgates for every other establishment, because a restaurant can say, well, I don't serve more than one glass of wine with the meal. Mm-hmm. So I think with regards to that, that may be something that should be put out there by you all, just to say, look, if you're within proximity, there may be some resistance, and these are the reasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because I don't want it to be a shock when they come here.
Yeah. Yeah, the legislature considered that, and so, I'm hoping that you guys will consider, what the legislature argued when this happened. It wasn't about serving. It was about something that every bed and breakfast in the United States of America does in every state of the union as part of the service that it provides. That's just what we're talking about. I'm not talking about anything other than formally recognizing that if I give a glass of wine to a guest, I've committed a 4th-degree felony because I've charged them to stay at my house. And now the state is essentially removing the felony part of me handing that glass of wine over.
So they're not selling them?
That's right. There's no sale, individual sale of anything. It's included in the price, just like the breakfast is. And I will also tell you, though, that it's very restrictive. Any B&B that qualifies for this can't have more than 20 guests total. So that's 10 rooms, essentially. And there are some 10-plus room B&Bs here in Taos who are not going to be allowed to apply for this permit. Okay. So it's just something that's headed down the road.
Any other comments, questions? Councilmember Fidel.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem with it. It's just like a license that we issue to a restaurant that's, whether it's within 300 feet of a church or a school. I don't have a problem with that because I think it's very restrictive, and I think it's good for your business. Question I have is two things. From your association, how many B&Bs are there within the town limits, are you aware of?
I just looked today and counted 16 that are listed on TripAdvisor, and there are another 20 outside of the town limits. So based upon essentially a zip code designation, which really isn't the town limits, TripAdvisor counts 16 of them right here in town. And that kind of leads to the second point I was going to talk about this evening. But yeah, it's substantial. Taos has more B&Bs per capita than any other city in the Southwest. The only city that has more B&Bs is actually Tucson, which has 500,000 people. So, the B&B industry here is integral. And when we do the numbers to apply for state grants and the Taos County grant, we've been able to prove that for every dollar that the county collects from B&Bs, we pay $8 in lodgers taxes. So, there's another. It's like this high-end experience that people sort of expect that sort of thing, and we're the only state in the country where people aren't allowed to give that little glass of wine to them when they check in, and when I tell guests that I can't, they're usually, there's either a snicker or, some sort of horror, like, well, they did over there, and like, well, they committed a 4th-degree felony. That's it.
I only have one other comment, and that is good luck with the county.
Thanks. The other issue that I wanted to bring up is back in the day, and I don't know if you, Mr. Peralta, were on the council back in the time, but in 92 or 94, the town passed an ordinance restricting the number of rooms in a bed and breakfast inside the town limits to 5. And now when B&Bs go to sell, that process stops the sale many times because of grandfathering needs. People are looking, going, are we grandfathered by that, or are we not? Were we here before then? And also, since that was passed, the industry has completely changed financially. Regulation alone now requires that a bed and breakfast with 6 rooms is what they call a lifestyle inn. It can do nothing more than pay the bills and afford me the opportunity, because I have 6 rooms, to maybe take a few really nice trips every year. Other than that, we make 0 in profit because we can't. It's just the economics of it. Because that old rule is still on the books, I was hoping that we could at least ask staff to entertain looking at moving that number up and increasing the idea that profitable bed and breakfasts are closer to 10 rooms. At that point, B&Bs make money, they hire staff, and people are actually employed. So that was my bed and breakfast hat.
Any questions? No? Oscar, is that something we can look at with regards to?
Yes, sir, you bet. I got the request earlier today from Brad, and I told him I had no problem with that. In fact, I'd be happy to look at that and bring it back for a council action so we can formalize that at a meeting sometime soon.
Terrific, and I'll be able to show you those numbers from the industry association, the spreadsheets indicating how that, how it works. The 6-room B&B being the lifestyle inn, et cetera. Give us some evidence. Thank you.
Yep.
Awesome. Okay.
And the other hat I wanted to wear was a very brief update. I was reelected chairman of the board at the Taos County Chamber for another year's term, and in the first year that I served, I came on board. We had about $3,400 in the bank. We had about $18,000 in accounts payable. We had $30,000 in loans to pay. We had $5,000 in payroll liabilities that we couldn't make, and about 300 members. In the year since, we've added 110 new members. We have about $30,000 in the bank. We have 0 in accounts payable, and our loans are paid down to about $16,000. The intent is that those will be paid completely off by the end of the year, and that we will have an executive director in place very soon, we hope. But the financial structure of the chamber, as so many around the country, fell apart in the Great Recession. And since we've gotten the financial affairs of the chamber in order, we hope that coming to you in the future, you'll have a strong advocate for business initiatives in this town with a professional on staff. That having been said, we are going to be pushing ahead with fiber initiative education. The university has implemented a new certificate program that people can get a certificate to learn how to use these fiber tools that are being delivered. And I also wanted to congratulate you guys on thinking outside the box on the ACD and the Main Street projects. We appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you. Anybody have questions, comments? No? Thanks, Brett.
Thank you. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to speak under the Citizens Forum? Come on up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome to our meeting.
Thank you. Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Stephanie Sanders. I'm with the Los Jardineros Garden Club, and I'm here to tell you a little bit about some of the things that the Garden Club is doing, but especially to tell you about our annual event that's coming up. August the 3rd is our 29th annual Garden and Home Tour. The Garden Club was founded in 1949, 64 years ago. And those first founding members took on as their first project collecting, distributing, and planting hollyhock seeds in the central downtown area. Those hollyhocks are the descendants, the ones that we have now, are the descendants of those first hollyhocks, and the movement is still going on. In the same spirit, the Garden Club continues to do very, very good works. Our Garden and Home Tour is always on the first Saturday in August. We consider that the season of purple and gold, when we have Russian sage and sunflowers and chamisa, all of those things that bloom here in Taos County and no place else. People come back year after year, plan their vacations to Taos to be here in time for the tour. That's why we always keep it on the same date. Last year we had 652 visitors for our tour. About a fourth of them come from Taos County. Another fourth of them come throughout the state of New Mexico. And the remaining half come from a combination of 28 states across the country. So we're bringing lots of tourists in for this. We have a selection of properties chosen for the historic value, for their power conservation, for their water conservation, for their amazing gardens, many of them xeriscaped. And we're very proud to have these homes on our tour because we consider the homeowners just over-the-top generous. I mean, how many of you would consider having 650 people come through your home in a single day? I know, Fred. Yay for Fred. So, no, it's a very big undertaking. It takes about 125 volunteers from the Garden Club and from the community to man this one-day event. It is such a pride-building event, such a shot in the arm that if it didn't make a penny, I think it would be worth doing. But in fact, it makes quite a bit of money, all of which is turned back into the community. All of the money that we make from this one fundraiser annually is awarded in the form of grants to nonprofit organizations throughout the county who wish to improve their landscaping. And when you go to the TCA or the Blumenshine or the Kit Carson House, the impression of the landscaping when you enter makes all the difference. And so that's our contribution to the ongoing beautification of Taos. Some of our projects also include education. Charter school, Rivers and Birds had an education project for 5th graders that we funded last year. Some of these projects are listed in the brochure that you have. I would like very much to ask you to be our guests for this year's tour. Now, Dolly Peralta is here, but she's in her role of hospitality chairman for the Garden Club. And she would like to give each of you a complimentary ticket and map to use on August 3rd and see why we are so proud of this endeavor. Thank you very much. Do you have questions?
Thank you.
that I can
Any other
Just,
questions? Go ahead.
Just a comment. I just like to point out for the viewing audience and those at home that your group is the one that was responsible for the hanging baskets on the Taos Plaza,
That's
which
right.
we greatly appreciate. Thank you very much.
That's right. Now, I will say it wasn't just our effort. You made it happen. The town council really made that project happen. And it's taken several years to get that one, so it's really successful. I think they're beautiful. And thank you for helping us.
They are.
Thank you.
I will say that I'm extremely envious of those baskets because I have baskets in my house that look nothing like that. So you guys do excellent work. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else wishing to speak under the Citizens Forum? Come on up. Welcome to our meeting. And if you'll just state your name.
Stevens Hall. Several weeks ago, there was some discussion about Echo Park and problems there with irrigation, guttering, ponding, and flooding. As of early last week, it still hadn't been, I believe, either resolved or determined what the problem was. And I wonder if somebody could tell me when that's going to happen, if it's going to happen. And second question is about traffic counts. In the last week or so, there's been some sort of traffic counting around the plaza, and I wonder if somebody could speak to that.
Well, we just pulled the Echo Park contract off, but if you ask her if you would speak a little bit towards the progress of the contract.
Yes, at the last time this item was discussed by the council gave us direction to accept an offer of settlement with the bonding company for the work that was not completed there. And one of the things that needed to be completed was the irrigation. And so what we've been doing since then is abating some of the more serious problems, which is the grading problem that exposes that field to being flooded. And so you go out there, you'll see there's a French drain that's been put in place there. And we, at the same time, in regards to irrigation, what we've been doing is interviewing the people, just talking, getting all the information that we that's available on what was actually put there in place. At this point, what we're looking at is the vehicle by which we're then going to engage somebody, use some settlement money, engage somebody to see about repairing it. But you'll recall that one of the commitments that was made at that time was to hold off a little bit and keep that cash in reserve so that the TSA then could use that cash to apply for, to try and leverage that cash to apply for a grant. And so we're allowing some of that time to pass. But in the meantime, we're preparing the vehicle by which we're going to then go in and repair those things. If it's if we're going to do it by with the working with the original vendor that installed it, if we're going to work with the architect that helped us, or that was a project supervisor, if you will, on the project. At this point, we haven't decided that. But anyway, that's what we're doing. We're sort of holding our time to allow the TSA to go out and use that cash as a match for repairs and new construction at the Echo Park.
So there wasn't, what was discussed also was the notion that somebody would go out and turn it on to see what happened, essentially. And so that never happened.
No, we haven't gotten to that point yet. No. I mean, it would take engaging somebody to do that. We don't want to do it ourselves for fear of invalidating the warranty on that work. So we want somebody who does that, who knows what they're doing and can, if you will, guarantee or warranty that, that they did everything that necessary, that we didn't blow out that system.
In the traffic counts?
I couldn't tell you anything about the traffic counts. That's being done by the state. It's not us.
So it was the Department of Transportation?
Yes, I believe so, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Steve. Anyone else wishing to speak under the Citizens Forum? See none, I will close the Citizens Forum and we'll move on to the consent agenda. So the items in the consent agenda, council members below, they've been reviewed by the mayor, and the mayor has placed these items on the consent agenda for the purpose of voting on all items with one vote. So it's the New Mexico Municipal League Annual Conference voting delegate, designation of appointment of Mayor Darren Cordova as the voting delegate, and Mayor Pro Tem Andrew Gonzalez as the alternate at the annual business meeting, which is held during the New Mexico Municipal League Annual Conference scheduled from August 27th through the 30th in Taos, New Mexico. And item B is a new Kubota tractor and implement purchase. Consideration and possible approval to purchase a Kubota M108 SH DC tractor and 10-foot rake attachment from Kubota Tractor Corporation in the amount of $63,828.10, and the Landprine hydraulic auger attachment from Mesa Tractor in the amount of $5,425.75 through the Houston-Galveston Area Council price agreement for use at Taos Regional Airport. The funding breakdown for this purchase is as follows: New Mexico Department of Transportation Aviation Division, $62,328.46. Town of Taos, $6,925.39 for a total of $69,253.85, exclusive of gross receipts tax.
Move for approval.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. What item?
Matters from staff.
Number 7.
Sorry. Apologize, I had to take a call there. Okay, item 7A, update by Holy Cross Hospital. CEO Peter Hofstetter, welcome. Welcome to our meeting.
About 2 hours long. I change that myself? Or you can change it from there if you like. I can. Just click? Yes. Perfect. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. As I had stated when we were here a few months ago, our intent was to try to continue to update you on the status of the hospital, where we are, what's going on, and it's in that spirit that I'm here tonight. We do have a presentation. I'll try to make it as quickly as possible. I understand that 4 minutes is the attention span, but according to the manager, I'm just kidding. Really, I think what I want to talk about is really two things. One is the financial piece of things, where we are, what's going on, both in the state and the federal level, and how that affects us. And the other is, if you sort of set aside the financial things, there are some incredible things happening at the hospital from an operational standpoint. If you look at things like infection rates and just some of the recognitions that we've had for the hard work folks are doing. So I want to just spend a few minutes and talk about that. I think from a financial standpoint, it's quite sobering. It's frankly not particularly good news, but I think it's important for people to understand where health care is. My personal belief is that the state of New Mexico, in particular right now, is frankly at a tipping point from a public policy standpoint where health care is. So I think in a large rural state, frankly, very poor health statistics and some financial challenges, we've got some pretty significant issues to deal with. So let me try to go through this. I'll be as quick as possible. And I won't bore you with everything on the slide, but from a history standpoint, what I'm showing you in the red is the reimbursement, what we've been paid by federal programs for the last 3 years. And then in the blue would be expense reductions we've done to try to manage that. I will say, just to be absolutely crystal clear, every one of these federal cuts that you see, we have zero vote on. That is something that either the state legislature or the federal government have done, and you can see the numbers are, frankly, quite overwhelming. It continues into 2011. Again, I won't bore you with all of the horrible details. I think this begins 2012, some of the very significant issues with the Seoul community funding decrease of $3.3 million. That is the funding that comes from the gross receipts tax from the county. I'm not here to point any blame at the county. The state of New Mexico has chosen to fund what's called Seoul Community Indigent Funding through a gross receipts tax in the counties. The counties raise the money, they certify that to the state certifies it to the federal government, and then the federal government, in this case, matches it times 3. There are 29 hospitals in the state that participate in that program. None of us have been paid since last October because the federal government and the state are fighting over the funding formulas back to 2001. They finally settled this the end of May, early June, and we started to get some payments last week. But you can see some fairly significant cuts. You can also see that we've worked hard at expense reductions as well. It continued into 2013 with that Seoul community funding. Sort of the gallows humor, as of April, every hospital in the country that accepts Medicare patients got a 2% cut based on the sequester, so we are doing our fair share to help the federal deficit. And then you can see expense reductions, and we are looking at a hospital-wide salary increases since we haven't given anybody a raise in 4 years, and the worry is getting too far behind in market share. Here's really the important point in all of this, is in the last 3 years we have been reimbursed over $15 million less than we were 3 years ago. That has nothing to do with the numbers of patients. That is, the payments we receive are $15 million less. We've cut over $5 million. I would suggest to you that an organization that can absorb $15 million in cuts, still keep, frankly, the doors open, not reduce services, and frankly excel in a number of things is doing a pretty good job. So it's a huge, huge issue, as you can see. This is a list of things that we know are coming up this year that will be problems as far as reimbursement. Again, a little bit of gallows humor. If you look at the sequestration, that number totals $85 billion in cuts to hospitals across the country. The president's budget shows 10-year cuts of $375 billion. The Republican House budget shows $600 billion in cuts over 10 years. So as hospitals, we're voting to keep sequestration and not worry about the other two budgets, but I don't think we vote. Seoul community funding, which is absolutely critical to this hospital. The simple definition is 35 miles from another hospital. As I said before, right now the federal government is matching that 3-to-1, and the intent of that was to reduce indigent care all over the country. And this is why I mentioned that I believe this is a public policy issue. These are all of the hospitals and communities in the state that participate in Seoul community. In the case of Albuquerque, UNM cut an agreement about 15 or 20 years ago with the state and said that they would take care of the indigent problem, which means Presbyterian and Lovelace, frankly, do a little bit less. But you can look down that list, you can look at the physical spread of those hospitals, and it really begins to talk about access issues. I can tell you in that group right now, every hospital on that list is in the middle of layoffs and expense reductions. Clayton Hospital stopped OB services about a month and a half ago. Rehoboth McKinley signed an agreement to merge with UNM. There's at least 2 hospitals in the southern part of the state that are outside their bond covenants and restrictions and in default. So I think you're looking at some very long-term significant issues in the state. It's a little bit scary, to be perfectly honest. This, I think, is most important for us. This red line shows you literally what we've been paid the last few years, a high of $9 million, 9.8. This year we're being paid $2 million. If anybody is a skier, I would suggest to you that that line looks a little bit like a black diamond at Taos Ski Valley. There's pretty steep. I think the important thing for all of us is the yellow line, which is uncompensated care. Right now, the hospital is absorbing $10 million a year in uncompensated care. $3.5 million of that is charity care. I would suggest to you morally, ethically, legally, and every other way, those are the folks we should be taking care of. That's what we're here for. The other $6.5 million is people that don't pay bills, people that don't have insurance, underinsured. And in large part, we're hoping a hunk of those folks will be covered by Medicaid expansion and the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. How soon that ramps up and what happens is obviously, in our case, a $6.5 million question. This is the really sobering news. When we talk about this is the hospital's financials, this is the what we call consolidated. That means it's the hospital and what we call TPS, which is Taos Professional Services. That is the physicians, Peñasco Clinic, and our management contract with Colfax. We're a fiscal year of June 1, so when we talk about unaudited, the auditors are just there. This is the year that ended in May 31st. A $5.2 million loss, which is not a good number, very difficult to sustain long term. I will tell you, which is a whole other set of conversations, over 2.8 million of that, it comes from losses in the physician practices. That is obviously not acceptable. It's about $1 million more than the national average. Right now, the national average loss per employed physician per year is $165,000, and again, that's a whole other conversation. That's just the unfortunate economics of healthcare. Fiscal 2014, this is the second restated budget. The budget we approved in May for June 1st was a break-even budget, which frankly would be a monumental goal. But given the settlement between the state and the federal government on Soul Community, that $2.4 million is exactly the difference that we won't get paid based on that settlement. That settlement shrunk the Soul Community indigent funding pool for the state by $120 million. It's a huge number. So in that budget, that loss does show the physician practices losing $1.8 million instead of $2 million. And I can tell you for the last 3 months, they are absolutely dead on budget. It does show a $5 million increase in revenue. Our goal is we have a number of new physicians coming, and we are just going to get out and really market and work as hard as we can to try to, frankly, build the business and keep people in the community. This is about people leaving and getting health care elsewhere. So those are frankly, the highlights there. This talks about, if you remember that first slide, a $15 million decrease in reimbursement and a $5 million cut. You can't cut your way out of this. There's not enough to cut. So there's a whole series of things we're looking at to increase revenue. And frankly, I won't spend a lot of time. There's some exciting stuff on there. That occupational health is a big, huge thing that would be, I think, a very nice business for the whole community. Some new doctors. We're talking about some fundraising and a bunch of other things. And just to try to wrap up quickly, I think it's really important to remember the finances are very much a struggle, but I will tell you there's some absolutely incredible things happening at the hospital that you need to feel really good about. We have not done a particularly good job talking about these things. I guess call that humility or whatever. But we are ranked at the top. We are one of the top 25 hospitals in the country for ACL. Our patient satisfaction scores, which is a measure that the federal government requires and partially pays us on, are the highest in northern New Mexico, and our scores have been increasing literally every month, which is frankly a testament to our employees. We've had their central line infections. I think the real important news is the line below that. Our infection rate is way lower than the national average and has been so for many years. And you know from time to time, As recently as a couple of weeks ago on TV, there's been, a new bacteria killing people in hospitals, and this is a very good story to tell. Again, I won't read all this to you. We are sending a team to California next month, paid for by the American Hospital Association, for recognition of a program we're doing in reducing patient harm. It's a national effort. Electronic health records, we've gotten a $2.1 million incentive payment from the federal government. Where we are with electronic health records puts us in the top 27% of hospitals in the country. We've created and got an award for an I award. It's a patient flag system for high utilizers in the emergency room. Very, very difficult patients. These are patients that, frankly, the police and everybody else deals with. Not only are we dealing with those in a better way, but those patients alone, the small numbers that we've been picking our way through, will save the system between $500,000 and $750,000. Again, just walking through, there's all kinds of really cool things that we're doing with medication reconciliation. There's a whole series of clinical improvement stuff. Obviously, the nursing program and scholarship program with UNM-Taos, which has been an incredible success. We've expanded radiology. We're doing a job shadow program we have been doing for a couple of years now with the Penasco and Taos high schools, and we get $3 million a year in big federal and private grants. Kresge Foundation, Kellogg, U.S. Department of Human Services. And last but not least, what keeps us up at night, the politics of the Affordable Care Act. Lord knows what's going to happen with that, as Congress fights. Probably the biggest thing, and where we could use any help you can give us, is come this fall with the debt ceiling, when we get to that point again and they start fighting over can we borrow more money or not. There are a significant number of physician and hospital payment systems and payment mechanisms that will all expire in December, and they'll all be mixed into that ugly budget conversation. The other thing is this whole indigent funding and state waiver. What the state's going to do with new Medicaid Centennial Care that starts January 1st is all tied into the federal and state negotiations over how they're going to get paid for the year 2014. We literally do not know what Medicaid or indigent fund will pay us as of January 1st. So we're sitting on budgets and we're trying to figure out what to do after December 31st. As I said, we've restated our budget once this year for a June 1st fiscal year. We expect to restate it again in the next 30, 60, 90 days once we get direction from the state and the feds. It's not a great way to run a business, but it is the world we live in. So wasn't 4 minutes, but it's the best I can do. Questions, comments?
Any comments, questions? Councilmember Gonzalez?
Peter, I did have one question for
Yeah.
you, and it was just something that I was discussing behind the scenes here with
Yeah.
Councilmember Peralta. With regards to an urgent care facility as opposed to an ER facility, what's the likelihood? I mean, and I know you guys probably operate something like that,
Right.
and I mean, obviously, somebody that goes into the ER with a sore throat,
Right.
Rather than getting billed at that,
Sure.
exponential rate, going to an urgent care
Right.
facility, get them seen, get them taken care of at the lower rate. Does that help with regards to what's gone back in indigent?
Yeah, it does and it doesn't. I mean, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. Our intent is, assuming we go forward with this occupational medicine, which will be, it's a whole workers' comp thing where we'd be a client of ourselves. We've already talked to Ski Valley, Kit Carson, UNM, the mines. I mean, people would love for us to do that. You recruit a special physician that is board certified. It's a whole formal program of how you do that. But as part of that, we would have an urgent care center. And what you would do is you'd reduce your emergency department visits and revenue, and you'd put them in a more appropriate place. So in the worst case scenario, you'd have less bad debt than you would in the other. So it's a good news, bad news. But I think more importantly is it's the appropriate place. And people would walk away with a $150 bill, not an $850 bill. So we would like to do that very much. So, and that would be on the land we own. We would build a building, and we've had previous conversations with the manager and stuff. So if we can pull all this stuff off, that's where we're headed. The other thing it's important to let you all know, we literally have no debt, which is really good news, thank goodness, right now. So we have no debt other than some capital leases, which is pretty typical. So good. Questions, comments, anything else I can tell you?
Councilmember, how does this affect your master plan moving forward, the whole build-out?
Sort of shrinks the cash flow.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
It does. I've had a couple of meetings in the last few weeks with Terry Bruner, and as you know, we have a $12.7 million loan from USDA. He would very much like us to take advantage of that, and did say that we could break it apart. We could do it in bite-sized pieces. So that's why one of the thoughts is, and our board will be discussing this tomorrow and then next month as well, is do we build one building, build a small building right off the bat? And we're still talking to UNM. Actually, there's a meeting next week with UNM in Albuquerque to talk about them building their building. So, the hope is to continue to move forward with that. The reality is we're still paying rent everywhere, and I'd rather pay ourselves rent than, pay rent all over. So we're going to try everything we can. The key will be, and I guess maybe it's a euphemism, but the key is to sort of rebalance our expenses. We're going to have to, as does every hospital in the country, how can you exist on Medicare and Medicaid? That's ultimately what this comes down to. So the hope is to do all of those things as we go forward. So
Okay.
we're going to try.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you for your presentation. We really
Sure.
appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Next, we will go on to item B, renewal of contract TT 1349 with Taos Sports Alliance. Consideration and possible approval of the renewal of contract TT 1349 in the amount of $85,000, inclusive of grocery receipts tax, with the Taos Sports Alliance for the management, programming, and field maintenance of the Taos Eco Park.
Yes, sir. Mr. Mayor, what we have here is the renewal of that contract that we've had with Taos Sports Alliance for the programming and the maintenance of the field in Echo Park. The item that was going to follow this, and we thought up until the last minute really here that it would have been proper to go forward, would have been all wrapped up into one package. But anyway, again, a little bit about why I asked to pull it back is that we think it's a very positive development, a very positive relationship that we've established with the Taos Sports Alliance, and then to ask them to then go a little bit further than that and take over all of the maintenance of the complex anyway was going to be a really positive step, and so. We still want to do that, and the intent is for that to continue going forward. But I just want to make sure that goes forward in the best possible light, and I just think that rather than just to let it go, we think it would have been perfectly legal for that to happen. But to just let it go like that, I think would at least expose us to for a very positive thing being questioned, and so to keep that all totally above board and positive. We're going to try and go a different route for that, but our intent is to still go forward. So anyway, with this, the town then goes the third year in this relationship. The notice I gave Taos Sports Alliance is that had been the town's expectation that at some point this activity be self-funded, and at least that was the call for it last year. We asked for the Sports Alliance to prepare a business plan that would have gotten to that point. And so with this contract, what we have is then the final year of the town subsidizing or the town paying for the Sports Alliance to be carrying this thing forward. Our expectation is that next year that the funding will be secured from some source in the private sector, and so that this will then be the last time that the Taos will be funding this activity outright. The way the contract is structured, we changed that last year. You'll recall, it gives all possible room for the Sports Alliance to find funding or to get a sponsor, et cetera. And so our expectation then is for that to happen. Anyway, with that, Mr. Mayor, I recommend approval.
Any comments, questions from the council?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Silva?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oscar, could you explain to me the ad alternates and how they play into this this contract?
There are no ad alternates per se for this contract, but the original contract that we had, you recall last year, was just the programming, and then we added to that another $10,000 or add more resources there for the maintenance of the field itself. And so I guess in that sense, it's an ad alternate. But this is sort of a continuation from last year. The only other ad alternate would have been the amendment that I asked to be pulled for another meeting.
So this is going to be then just an $85,000
Yes, sir.
contract approval?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so then shall we not strike these ad alternates in the current one moving forward?
If you're referring to the piece in the contract in terms of their deliverables to us, that's the original part of the contract. That's the piece of the contract that we are paying for. So it's not so much. It's not an ad alternate, sir, in the sense that we are paying more money for extra things that we're asking for. This is the same contract that we're asking.
So I'm looking at this ad alternate as something that we add to the contract, and 5,000, 5,000, and 1,800, Councilmember Peralta.
Mr. Mayor, if you remember last year that we made an amendment to the contract of $10,000 for the maintenance of the field. Because we're not creating a new contract, it stays in as an ad alternate in the renewal of the contract for this year. So that's the reason that language is in there that way.
These two, Councilman Peralta, but what I'm referring to is these two ad alternate items are more specifically dealing with an electronic sign and I guess a website, taosecopark.com.
Mr. Mayor, I thought we had discussed that on the last budget go-round also, that in talking with TSA, that the $5,000 would just barely minimal get that electronic sign going. So if it's, I mean, to me, reading this contract, it's showing for Taos Eco Park and the Daktronics electronic sign, that's what I expect that the ad alternates be used for. If we're giving $10,000 additional for maintenance of field, then I would think that the ad alternate language be removed and it be just, stated in there for field maintenance. But, I guess just from where it is in the discussions that we've had, that the sign will take way more maintenance than the $5,000 that's in there right now, based on the recollection of what we had in the discussion during the previous contract session last year.
Yes, sir, Councilman. All the items that you have on there that last year were called ad alternates are simply just being funded again today. I apologize if I'm not being clear here. What you see in there is are items that we added to the contract last year. So in that sense, were ad alternates last year. We're just simply funding that. Again, I guess we should have changed the nomenclature there there's nothing new being added to the contract that we did not pay for last year. So in that sense, there's no change in that. In fact, not even for cost of inflation increase or anything like that. So it's all the things we asked for them to do last year that the council approved in the contract last year. All those items are there now, and I guess as looking at this contract again, we should have just taken that nomenclature out of there that called it ad alternates. They're ad alternates in a sense in that we changed the very original contract of 2 years ago.
So it should be VWM.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So forth.
So are we in essence approving a $96,800 contract?
No, you're approving an $85,000
Okay.
contract.
All right.
So representation would be V of 2 delegates. Representation of 2 delegates would be V.
Yes.
Then operations of Taos Eco Park would be
Yeah.
W.
Yes, and
Then X, correct?
yes, sir. And the only change there is that there are no ad alternates. That's just simply the list of all of the services that we're providing.
Gotcha.
Okay. Because I could see where Councilmember Silva would.
Well, I guess the question I have is that, if the Daktronics sign is in there, is it operational?
So where
Could
did
we,
the 5,000
Mark, do you mind briefing us on that?
The three ad alternates are not included in our scope of work, nor are they being funded.
So why are they in the,
So is the Sports Alliance asking for 96.8, as you mentioned?
that's what I would see it as. If it's ad alternate, we're going to fund to the tune of 5,000 for the electronic sign, 5,000 for the website, and then 1,800 for the annual
Yeah,
convention.
Those three items are not included in our budget or our scope of work. They were denied last year and did not continue on with this year.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, but this is a contract from last year.
The ad alternates were not funded.
They're in your contract.
So,
And so what we're renewing is the exact language of the contract from last year. No changes to it. It's a renewal of an existing contract. And those three ad alternates are in your contract from last year.
No, they're not.
So they're in language, you signed it.
Mayor,
Alternates in there not
I-
approved or funded from last year.
If you could come up here so we can hear you on the,
Excuse me, text from Joel directly so I can answer these questions appropriately. Those three items were denied, not approved, and not funded in last year's contract. Our contract this year does not have those three items in that either.
Mr. Mayor, Councilman, I do apologize for the confusion that we see here. And I would just ask your indulgence here to if you would just pull this thing back and so that I can get this straight with both the TSA, the staff, and everybody who's worked on this sort of thing. It does seem to be a busted plate. I think the best course of action that I would recommend very strongly here is for us to pull this back and then bring it back to you after we've straightened all of this out.
so just so that the council knows where the intent is it the intent of staff to include the services, the operation of TaosEchoPark.com, operations of the electronic sign, and the representation at the annual convention for $1,800 included in the $85,000 total? Is that the understanding?
Yes, sir. And we thought that's what we had worked out with the contractor. If that's not the case, we need to go back and work this and
That's not
actually
the
get the detail.
understanding of. as
Mr.
a
Mayor,
board member, correct?
Mr. Mayor, from what I understood it, and the kind of have it with what Mr. Yarvitz is saying, was that it was asked for last year, it was denied based on our budget approval process. So for me to see it in here almost makes it look like we're going to increase the contract amount to the tune of that $11,800 in the overall. Because if not, then we're asking TSA to, I mean, that's in essence reducing their budget by 11.8 out of the 85. Now, when we spoke to this last year, it was that the amounts that were in there were way too little to do the operation of that sign because of the reprogramming and everything else that needed to be done with it. So I remember it being scrubbed, but why it still ended up in the language is...
That's correct.
Now help me understand what the sign is a brand new sign. Should be a functioning sign. What is the $5,000 for? Is it not installed or?
I don't have any idea except that I don't think we had the, Joel, if you're listening, Joel, would you tell me the answer to that question?
Well, from what I can remember, Mr. Mayor, it was just with regards to the fact that it was the programming of the sign itself and the updating and the continual maintenance.
I have a response.
Okay.
The sign has never worked.
Well, I think it works. It's just nobody probably understands how to use it.
It is for, the money that was assigned was for programming the sign, and it was turned down in last year's budget, and it has to be repaired, apparently, the sign.
Okay, do you know anything
So
about it?
what I
Steve?
know, Mayor, is that that's a sign that was in front of Town Hall at one point.
Yeah.
And it was removed and installed. It's over there in the park as you come in to the driving area. That island in the middle of the parking lot is where the sign is on a base. And to my knowledge, it never has worked since it's been moved there.
Well, it has worked because for testing purposes, Ruben did put it up to work
All right?
when we were going to make a decision, shall it remain there or
When
shall
I've
it
talked
be
with
moved?
Joel Israel, he said, to his knowledge, it hasn't worked, and it doesn't work now.
It hasn't worked at that location. Yes, but it does work. It's a brand new sign.
Yeah, and we should probably look at some warranties for that sign, because we paid a lot of money for that, so.
And I think we should also go back and talk to the contractor about exactly what's expected in this contract. I thought that by the time we had gotten to these negotiations that we were all in agreement as to what was in here. Apparently, we're not. And so I would just request that we pull this thing back so that we get a chance to bring it back to you with complete understanding from all parties.
And before you get to that, Mark, I'd like to know on the sign, do they have a bid from someone that can attest that it can work for $5,000 and what happened to it?
Let me just ask, Ruben, do you know how to use the sign and program it?
I programmed it a couple of times. The first time that when we opened it up, and then the second time when I worked with
Joel,
and we connected to it, we added something for...
You changed the color scheme? I remember you changed, because we asked you to change this color scheme.
And he was going to have somebody else start doing it for him, and they couldn't get into it, but we did that.
I understand that it's out of the range of our expertise to program and run the sign for that budget, since we're not quite clear if it's working, and I don't believe we've spent any more energy on the sign, as it was denied last year as an ad alternate, so we never pursued it any further than that.
Okay.
Clearly, this is a busted play, and again, Mayor, Council, I apologize for that. This item is not ready to go. I request that you give us time to then bring it back later.
Yeah, and in your discussions, Oscar, I would like to see exactly if we're providing the sign and the facility, and there's not a, as you just mentioned, the expertise to run the sign, does that then fall back on the town, or does it fall within the responsibility of the organization to make sure that they have someone that understands the sign? I think there has to be a clear understanding there that, what are we going to do in the event you don't have someone that has the expertise?
Another question I have, Mayor, if I may, is that sign going to be beneficial to the Echo Park?
My message here said it was one screen with date and time only that was working. Is that correct, Ruben?
I'm sorry?
It was one screen with the date and time only that was working.
We had a few of them that we configured when I was showing them how to do it. Then he asked some gentleman to come in and work on it, and he never could get it going. Some young kid.
I think the handoff was incomplete, and it wasn't really something we were probably going to take it on as an additional responsibility if we could figure out how to make it work properly within a budget of $5,000 to program and run it. But apparently, when it was denied last year, that we didn't pursue it, and the person who worked with us on it was a volunteer, and I don't know if his expertise this is.
And that's the reason why I want to make sure we're clear
the sign
on the handoff is incomplete. What was your expectations, and what is the town, this way we can know whether we move forward with that or not. So.
Well, and I think with regards to the town, I mean, the sign probably should fall back within the purview of the town, because of the dollar amount that we invested into that sign. I believe it should be our own tech that works on that sign as opposed to having outside.
Well, I think that we should definitely be able that it should work, but I think that it's the Sports Alliance responsibility to make sure that we have someone that knows how to program it, because I'd hate for town staff to have to go and change a date for a function.
Well, yeah, for their function.
No, if it works and if it's easy to program and manage, I'm sure we'd be happy to take care of it, but I don't believe we've had any success with it on the handoff, nor were we funded last year in terms of the ad alternates to deal with the sign. So it pretty much sat idle from that point on.
Well, and which is part of what we have to talk about. That's
right.
Not, at least my understanding in those negotiations as well. And so I guess we should just go back and talk about that, including where those resources are, or how much that $5,000, where those $5,000 went to if it didn't go to repair the sign. Again, we thought this contract was ready.
It is ready without the ad alternates. Everything is complete. The 3 ad alternates are not included in our scope of work and are not being funded. That was denied last year, so we're continuing on with the same denial from last year. moving on the contract as it is. The sign didn't, we weren't being paid to operate the sign from last year, so we didn't deal with it.
So, just to be clear here, you didn't get a chance to see this contract before it came to the council?
It's the same one from last year.
Yes.
It was signed by Justin
I worked
Lee.
on it for hours last year. The sign was not included as approved from last year's budget. Therefore, we did not work on the sign or deal with the sign after that fact.
Well, I then apologize that you did not get a chance to review this contract well enough before we brought it forward. My understanding was that you had, and again, I would just request that this thing be set back, and I'll work on it myself this time.
Okay, I'd be happy to go over that with you. I believe that's what ad alternate means. After the 85,000 is approved, those are 3 items for discussion, whether or not you want to include those or not. But as a continuation from last year's contract to this year, it's the same contract without those 3 ad alternates in the budget. That's what I understand. And that's what Joel told me is correct. Long distance.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Beta.
Thanks. And I have to agree with Mr. Yerovich that it's the same contract from last year. He was involved in it. He saw it. He read it. So the fact that he didn't review it this year, it doesn't change the content and the legal understanding. But the bottom line, as Oscar is saying, we have a disconnect. The handoff's not proper. Let's go ahead and bring it back at the next meeting. We have time. It doesn't go in effect till the middle of August. And let's regroup and move forward.
Okay.
Entertain a motion to table.
So moved.
Apologize for the confusion here.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next we will go to item D. Consideration and possible approval of Resolution 1336, Budget Adjustment Request for fiscal year end June 30th, 2013. The budget adjustment request balances all line items and funds to end of your final expenditure amounts. Welcome, Marietta.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, town manager, and youth council member. I did pass out a revised resolution just with some clerical errors on it. What I'll do is you have the summary in front of you. Most of these adjustments are based on additional revenues that we received. So most of these are transfers out to different funds that are associated with those revenues. In general fund, and I guess if I'll go through the summary, if you have any direct questions, then I'll go to those. In general fund, the main transfers were revenues increased by $22,904 from convention center services. We received more revenues in there, so in turn transferred that to general fund, and also about $8,100 from our state shared gross receipts tax. So that was also transferred into general fund. And then a couple of last ending year transfers out, $45,000, $20,000 to the airport fund, and $25,000 for into the transportation fund. In that one fund, we continually, at the end of the year, have a problem with the cash balance there because of our revenue. Our reimbursements from the state are usually out 30 to 60 days. This year, it happened that we hadn't received May's revenues nor June's in time of closing, so we're going to keep that as a permanent transfer in that fund, just as a cash reserve, so we don't have that problem at the end of the year. And then the airport, we did a lot of major expenditures at the end of the fiscal year, where we didn't have that cash reserve either, so those two were the major changes at the end of the year. On the expenditures, it's pretty much moving from categories, either from our personnel cost to operating or capital. And there was actually only 2 funds, the fleet and library, that happened for minimal amounts. So actually everybody in general fund did a good job in keeping within their budgets. Obviously the projections that we were off slightly, a couple $100,000. You'll see that in the financial report when we go through that. The other funds are just like I said, revenues, which is a good thing. We did receive more revenues in the state shared, the gasoline tax, lodgers tax fund. On the lodgers tax fund, we transferred out the appropriate amounts to the funds that do receive those per the ordinance, and then maybe some of community grants fund. We just had a transferring of categories, just a wrong when we got that wrongful conviction grant. Those amounts were a little bit different. And other than that, not much in capital. The only thing in capital, we did do an actual budget adjustment to bring in that $272,000 that we did get for that insurance claim. And other than that, I think everything else is pretty much explained there. If you do look at the resolution, the revised one on page 2, it's just a clerical. I put general fund instead of what it should be as the 2011 street improvement fund. And then on page 3 of 9, I had to add the lodger's tax promotional funds coming in. I did an out, but I didn't do an in. And then on page 4, the same thing, just change in word on general fund to the 2011 street improvement fund. So, I stand for any questions?
Any comments, questions? Any comments or questions? No. How are we overall, Maria, I didn't catch that part. How do we finish the year end according to, is that May's numbers? Would that be May's numbers?
These are, and that, if you want, we can go to, I think on the actual financial report, we have that information on that one.
Okay. I'll wait for that. Okay. Any other comments, questions? If not, what is the pleasure of the council?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Next, we'll go to the financial update. Marietta.
So on the financial update, and this is through June's actually distribution. Our June was up actually 3.32% from the previous year at this time. And like we did in October, we went the first 4 months, 3 of the first 4 months were down quite a bit. And so we did our projections in October, and we said we were going to be short 6%. Well, you know, with the trend picking up the last 3 of the 4 months at the end of the year, we had a net increase. So in all, we thought we were going to be short about $374,000 between the 2 general fund sources, and it ended up being $33,000. So that just shows how the gross receipts can fluctuate, you know, up and down, and hopefully up on a consistent basis going forward. The overall revenues for the general fund was $10,251,301. And like I said, a positive look for the new, well, what we call our new year. The expenditures, we total were $9.5 million to end the fiscal years. And like I said, the departments had made the projections, and we were off about $242,000 less than what projected. Probably about 30% was that personnel, and the other was 70% was probably operating expenses. But we've already made those changes going forward into the new budget. You know, some of the legal costs that we didn't spend, we've taken out. And so even though we projected short, we did a lot of changes in the upcoming budget that, you know, that we've accounted for those monies somewhere else right away. The ending balance, we're ending up with $1.7 million. I think when I did the original, we did the budget, we were about $1.4 million, so we gained $272,000 in that ending balance. So we have an additional 18 days over our required reserve. And discussing with Oscar, that's pretty much where we want to be. Not too much more. And
about
so
45 days.
Yes. So I think he's comfortable with that.
Yeah,
and so
we're at 48 days. That's a very strong reserve. And
48, yes.
I would like to, I mean, if it's okay with the council, to eventually see at 2/12. I mean, I think
that would be ultimate, I think, to be at the 2/12.
You know,
especially
I know it's a struggle, but, you know.
We'll give you 30 days to get there.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing being, Mr. Mayor, is that now that the economical circumstances are starting to, we're seeing the uptick and the improvement as to not get back where we were, we're better off in being at that 2/12 regardless, especially if that's where we're allowed to be.
Which would be a pretty conservative position to be in.
Right.
So, and you know, and it is going up. We did get the receipts. I just saw visually today, probably $11,000 more from last time. So, you know, there's they're going up, steadily, but they're not coming down, which is good. Our capital projects, we did a couple of things in the facility funds. That's mainly maintenance on the buildings and the parks and that kind of stuff. Through the end of the fiscal, we did about another 8% through this month, and then on the airport construction fund, about 19%. So, you see the total budget, $11 million. We spent this year $3.3 million. Not necessarily that all those projects are complete. We do have the ones that we did complete, a lot of the design work for the airport, and a couple of big projects, but that's one of our areas that we are looking at diligently and trying to figure out what to do to get those capital money spent and not carried over. And nothing really on the debt service, just our payments. Everything was made, and no covenants missed, and everything is good to go on that side. The second page is just a summary. What he did show is a percentage of a variance on the percentage of what we said on May's report that we were going to end up the year. And, on property taxes, we actually received 6% more than what, we anticipated. And pretty much the figures around are pretty close within the 6% was the highest on one of those, and a couple of negatives, distribution fees.
Okay, go ahead.
And then same thing on the expenditures, just showing like each department what the projection that we were met, either negative or positive. So, and then also on the ending balance.
Okay, good. Mr. Mayor, Marietta, and Oscar, on the property tax, is there any way to get a report from the county as to what we should be getting, not necessarily what we do get, but in other words, do they track what they billed and then what doesn't come in, so that we would say, for example, we're 4% under or 5% under what we should have gotten at the end of May from the collection of property tax, and so that's the delinquency rate?
Right. I have not received any reports from there. And then last year I did try to get their actual, because the calculation that we use to figure this out, they have the more accurate figures, the county does, and so I tried getting those from them last year, but not in detail of what is still owed or what is delinquent or what we can, but I'm sure I can get with, I think they directed me to the assessor's office last time to get that information, so I will look into that.
But no question, the delinquency rate should be one of the key statistics in our annual financial report, and in the statistics section of our annual financial report, we'll make sure it's there this year.
I'm just curious to see what the delinquency rate is on property taxes. That's all.
Okay.
Okay. Any other comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor, I did just have one additional question. Oscar, with regards to everything that we have back in surplus, and again with us trying to raise the revenues as much as we can, what's the utilization of the GSA auction site, and what are we doing to dump some of our, we've talked about this in the past, and
yeah, and that conversation comes up as well among the department heads, because there is a lot of surplus accumulating out there. We're not nearly as effective as we should be with that. In fact, I'll give you a quick anecdote. We had in our surplus, or in our stores, the theater seats for years. A huge crate of theater seats, and we just haven't been very effective at unloading that. In many of these cases, some of that surplus should be unloaded as just simply junk. I mean, some of that stuff we should be able to just give away or sell as scrap metal and things like that. And so, yes, we got quite a bit of work to do there.
Councilmember Gonzalez, we did have a little bit of movement now in the last month. Sharon has got some items on. We did get that backhoe or Bobcat, whichever one it was, on there, and I think that closed, and that brought in, quite a bit of, I'm not positive of the amount, but some kind of revenue. So, those big items go really well. We do have a lot of junk that, is it worth our time, to get on there and try to make something? But we make, old cell phones, $100 here, something. So, but there is.
But the critical step to that is actually getting stuff that's in your warehouse declared surplus, So
Right.
it gets on the site in the first place, and that's where the disconnect is. I mean, the actual stuff that's offered is not that much. It's all the junk that we're actually, all the disposable assets that we're holding, getting onto that site is where the disconnect is.
Yes.
And we just need to be a lot more aggressive about that. You're right to point that out.
So should we be volunteering for the site hoarders?
Yeah, you'll be surprised what all stuff is out there that we should probably be getting rid of. I mean, some of that stuff, there's even a question of who actually owns it. Again, another quick example: we have a vendor cart over at the park, at parks that the vendor just sort of abandoned it. We took it over. Is it ours? Is it not ours? In between the time that we figure that out, years have passed, and it's just part of what's piled up in a lot of these our warehouses.
Okay. Councilmember.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Marietta, I'm aware that there's gov deals, public surplus, government liquidation. Which agency are we using?
We use Public Surplus,
Okay.
and they have several government entities around the state, quite a bit. I think they have maybe 15 to 20 agencies that they work with. So it's Public Surplus is the one that we use.
Okay.
And we do get, offers from others, to try to get onto theirs, with the bigger pieces of equipment. It's usually with the big pieces of equipment that these guys, really want us to look at. But, with staff time and the resources that we have right now, this is what we're working with. But
is that organization, are they the most user-friendly? I mean, easier to work with?
I think Sharon feels that we work well with them. The website is really, unless anybody here that's tried to bid on it, if we have concerns about it, we try to, but you can post questions. There's if, somebody has a question on, we answer that, everybody gets to see it. So it's user-friendly, I think, for the buyer and for us.
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you, Mayor.
Next, we'll go to item F, consideration and approval of Resolution 1337, approving the Department of Finance and Administration fourth quarter report year ending June 30th, 2013. Marietta.
Mayor, council members, so this is my summary of a report, and you have online the DFA report. We throw all our figures on here. It's tailored to their line items and how they want everybody concise to bring in all their data. So I don't know if it makes any sense to you. It's just our numbers are imported into this report. Same kind of figures, everything that I presented to you, the amount of expenditures for general fund, for the revenues, and it's a requirement that we have this report to you and approved by council and mayor. I mean, I'm telling you this report is correct on my behalf.
Okay. Councilmember Peralta.
Move for approval.
Motion.
Second.
And a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Marietta.
Thank you. You won't see me for another year. No, I mean in that fashion.
What are you taking?
Okay. Next, we go to item G, update regarding the relocation of Central Communications to renew the Emergency Central Command Center located at 1146 Gustorf Road. Abigail.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Abigail and
Eric Caddy with LR Kimball.
Welcome to our meeting as well.
Thank you, Mayor.
So, Mr. Mayor, council members, the main message that I would like to report to the mayor and council today is that we have made a lot of progress on this project. In fact, the actual PSAP equipment has been delivered and is currently sitting at the new center. All pieces of equipment have been accounted for, so the grant amount that DFA awarded us, the $362,000 that paid for that 911 equipment, has been received. Okay. other important part of the message is that although we have made a lot of progress, there is a specific development that we've come across that is delaying the move-in deadline for the July 31st and pushing us about 7 weeks back. And we're now looking at mid-September, September 18th to be exact. The main delay for that is that Motorola purchases the 911 calling equipment, also known as the PSAP, from certain portions come from a specific vendor, and that vendor has specific expertise when it comes to the configuration of the system. And to date, we have not been able to secure a commitment from that vendor as to when they can come and configure that system for us. That's the reason for the pushback on that date from July 31st to now September 18th. Are there any questions so far?
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Abeta?
Thank you. Abigail, I understand the delay, through September 18th, but it appears right now that September 18th is still a very soft date until we get a commitment from this vendor.
Right. Actually, in fact, Councilmember, thank you for pointing that out. Eric is working diligently on that. We've actually made contacts with the vendor's manager and hope to get a response within the next couple of days. So I think even at having the September 18th, we feel comfortable that that gives us enough cushion, if you will, to get us up and running into the new command center by that time.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, my question to you is, what would be the possibility of, and what would that do cost-wise, if we were to take the existing PSAP and put that in order to get operational, and then have them come in and replace that with the new one?
Councilman, the complexities with that become
enormous,
prohibitive, because it would require you to turn down your current call-taking operations while you relocate that equipment. And then you would essentially have to redirect all your calls to a supporting agency. I would assume, I think there's Española, yeah. And I don't think they, from my understanding when we started this project, they don't have the proper capabilities to support the radio and the amount of call-taking volume that you have.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Mr. Mayor, council members, with setting that aside, that's our first slide, letting you all know that there is a delay and the reason for that delay. So now we will continue to go over the progress that continues to be made. We do have progress on a daily basis, and so I'll ask Eric to go ahead and brief you all on our task status.
Thank you, Abigail. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilman. I have set up the task status this month based on each major task area. I have grayed out the text from last month and kind of put the latest update, if you will, as the bolded items. So for the KCEC build-out, the only thing really that remains at this point, there are a couple pieces of furniture still in the center down there, and we're actually using those as an interim facility for setting up call-taking positions until we relocate the dispatch, the remaining 2 dispatch councils from the existing dispatch center. Circuit orders for CenturyLink were placed last week, so that was a pretty major milestone to overcome. The relocation of the dispatch furniture from the location at Civic Plaza Drive to Gusdorf, the first phase of that occurred in the first week of July. We moved 3 of the consoles were pulled out of there, refurbished, sent down to Gusdorf. And those positions right now are being turned up with the call-taking equipment. Next slide, electrical and networking. So Advanced Communications was contracted to complete all the infrastructure elements as outlined by Motorola in their contractual documents.
I'm sorry, Eric, if I may. Mr. Mayor, council members, if you recall in the last meeting, you had given us the authority to negotiate a contract or to finalize the negotiations of the contract into the amount of $80,000, and the negotiations were finalized, and the contract amount was a little over $71,000, $71,375. Okay, sorry.
No worries. Okay, the next item is the order and installation of the call-taking equipment. So as Abigail mentioned, that equipment has all been received and is currently at the Goose Door facility. The transition of equipment from Civic Plaza Drive to the Goose Door Road facility, once we're ready to execute that element of the project, that will be undertaken by Advance. That will be one of the last elements to take place. Next slide, thank you. So currently today we have, at the time we created these slides, we had these tasks in progress. One was tracking the shipment of the call taking equipment, which has arrived. Negotiations for the movement of recording devices to meet with the procurement rules of the town. We have to acquire 3 quotes. I have a denial from CenturyLink, which accounts for 1. I have a quote from GoCirco, and I have a pending quote coming from ISC, who was named on the state contract when that was released. I should have that quote from ISC by the end of the week, at which time I'll be able to make a recommendation to Abigail on which contract to proceed with.
And just, I know, Oscar, you don't like acronyms, but ISC is just ISC.
There is no, it's not an acronym for.
Well, it's their name, I'm sorry, yeah.
Testing of the network resources from the emergency call center to town hall, the core network. So we've been working on that today. We spent some time doing some troubleshooting this morning and then spent time on the phone this afternoon with the Juniper support team. I think we have all the right pieces in place. We should complete that exercise tomorrow. We have one more call scheduled for tomorrow afternoon at 1 p.m., at which time we'll be ready to validate the transition of radio traffic from the current Civic Center.
If I might, just to remind the council, what we're talking about here, I guess over the course of the year, of last year anyway, I heard a lot of conversation about how vital it was going to be and therefore how expensive it was going to be to provide for redundancy at the new center, because it would have taken a tower, it would have taken a lot of equipment, and for that redundancy to be achieved. And the way we're achieving that redundancy is through fiber. Precisely the broadband that Kit Carson has brought to town now allows us then to be able to connect and also provide redundancy to that connection through broadband. Anyway, so that's what we're doing. That's why you're not hearing conversations about having to move towers and build new towers and things like that.
So the tower, we're going to have a microwave link to this, from the facility to this tower, and then redundancy through fiber?
No, sir. All of the connection will be through fiber, and there'll be one circuit in the fiber, and then there'll be the redundancy will be through other networks in the fiber optics.
Okay.
So it's such that if one circuit gets broken, there's redundancy built into the system through the thing.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Mayor?
And the reason I point that out is because I even today I hear from people in public talking about how, it's going to be still a very expensive move to move the tower, et cetera.
Councilmember Peralta?
Would we be affected in our redundancy within our network, or our framework, if we had a fiber cut like we had a couple of weeks ago going out, linking us with the outside world?
So, Councilman, to address that question, that's the last bullet point there. Currently, you have only one connection between Town Hall and the current dispatch center.
No, but what I'm saying is that we had a fiber cut between here and Angel Fire or someplace like that, and that cut off cell phones, it cut off internet, everything going out of town. Would the fiber network within town still operate so that we wouldn't have that issue with our tower? That's my question.
Yes, sir. So the next part to that was the fiber link you have currently between Town Hall and the Goose Door facility is a loop. So if you were to, so it's a full circuit, so to speak. It's a 360-degree circuit. If you were to experience a cut on one side, the traffic diverts to the other side. So to answer your question, if you were to to have a fiber cut on one of the links, you would not lose connectivity between the two locations. It is a redundant.
No, I'm saying that, let's say the 360 stays intact.
Okay.
But we have a fiber cut that is sending the networks, the fiber networks, outside of this community into the world.
On a main transmission line.
And on the main transition line outside of the community. If that's cut, does that affect our connections inside or not?
Yeah, I'm going to have to let Ruben, because that really falls outside of the scope of this project. This project is going to have redundant connections throughout for your emergency communications equipment. Now, what happens with elements of data moving in or out of the town, I don't know.
This is an internal network that will work because we have power, and it'll continue to communicate even though that was broken, and we proved it last time. While everybody else was down, we still had our network working, and we, even with that cut, we have a redundant connection to the outside, and it's going north through Colorado. So we have multiple redundant connections.
Is that through TaosNet?
That's through TaosNet, yes.
And I'm proud to say that they're using my tower too.
Yes.
Okay, that's all, it just is just for the public to understand that
Yes.
if we get cut off from the outside world, it doesn't
survive.
kill us inside. So that's the importance of it.
Yeah, and to be sure, eventually, once we're settled in there, to add, I guess, not redundancy, but triple, I guess, redundancy, we are going to be looking at low-cost solutions about putting a small antenna at the Goose Dorf.
Microwave.
Yeah, and to communicate with the Civic Plaza Drive facility via this antenna. In the event that all our redundancies are interrupted locally, which the likelihood of that is.
We have a third one in place already, but that one's not configured.
Yeah, so there would be, that way there would be 4 redundancies.
So, Oscar, if we decide to sell Civic Plaza Drive, the building, what portion of the building is needed? Is there a transmitter building, or is the transmitter equipment located inside the building in a room?
Mr. Mayor, you have the remaining equipment at the Civic Center Drive would be a back room that has a rack of radio equipment in it.
I think I've seen that. Yeah. So in the event that we'd sell it, we'd have to sell it.
For at least a short period of time. The idea is to keep it there, to keep costs down, and when time comes to upgrade the radios and to move into the next generation, then we could go ahead and make those upgrades over at Goose Dorf and leave that equipment behind, rather than making that great big investment right now. It works right now, and as we need to upgrade, we would do that over there, and instead of adding the cost of upgrading now, putting it in place, and then having to move it.
Great.
Mr. Mayor, I do have one question. With regards to Next Gen, on Go Circle's site, they're talking about the text to 911 services availability on some PSAPs. Is that something that our PSAP will contain the ability to do, being that we are getting the newest equipment?
Councilman, the equipment that has been delivered from Cassidian it has the foundational pieces, so it's IP capable. Cassidian currently does not offer a text to 911 solution. That has to come from the vendor.
But that is something eventually we could tie on to with that PSAP.
With that equipment, yes. I know Cassidian has plans to develop modules to deliver text to 911, and it's IP capable, so it would be able to receive that data. A lot of that is currently tied up with NENA and APCO, which are the 2 major governing bodies for public safety, and them defining there's several different ways you can get a text message into a PSAP.
Okay. Good to know.
Question?
Thank you.
Okay. Any comments, questions?
Then I have the next slide is just showing everyone these are the tasks that have been completed since the last council meeting. And and then budgetary overview of where we stand today. So we are still, at this point, I think we're doing very well. We're well under what the what the budgeted amount of $345,000 was.
So, Mr. Mayor, council members, the last month when we did the presentation, the estimated budgetary total was $188,000. Certain things have changed, but they've been able to kind of like wash each other out. For example, we had allocated $80,000 for the contract with Advanced Communication, but that came in at $71,000. We have received a quote from Go Circle for the moving of the recorders at $12,500. That's not set just yet because we are awaiting an additional quote, and then there is some fiber that need to be purchased in the amount of about $5,000. So the amount that you saw last month and now the delta is about $8,000, $8,300 to be exact. Okay. And I'm sorry, Eric, the following table just provides a breakdown of what those costs are. Keep in mind that those costs have been rounded to the nearest dollar.
And you should expect that there will be a continual fluctuation
Yes.
here, at least a little, that small delta all the way until the project is done.
Right. And with that, Mr. Mayor, council members, that concludes our presentation. If there's any questions, happy to answer them.
Okay, any comments, questions? Councilmember Beta?
Mr. Mayor, Abigail, you said you're waiting for one more coat?
For the recorders, yes.
And has that coat been received? Is it?
No, so we did get a denial, somebody saying that they couldn't do this type of work. Go Circle gave us a quote about $12,500, and we've also asked ISC to provide a quote, and we're awaiting their response.
But Abigail, we've disclosed the first coat?
I just snapped right now when you said that. Well, it was a rough estimate.
Okay, there you go. Rough estimate. Ballpark number. Thank you, Abigail.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just want to tell you all, thank you, Abigail and Eric, for your presentations. It's nice to be briefed and that we will know what's going on when we get questions from the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Abigail, I also just want to, I was talking to Councilmember, and actually this is
Okay.
I'm just going to let the council know. Thank you, Abigail. Thank you. I have been continuing discussion with the county in hoping that they will look at this seriously and, remove the politics from that. And I believe that they will come, I hate to say it, to their senses, but I will say it, I guess, because it will be a logistical nightmare to create another dispatch facility. It just doesn't make sense. It goes against all common sense, and we're, as you know, I did send a letter. It wasn't shot down in its entirety, that they're still looking for other numbers. Meanwhile, I am also looking at the state and positioning the town in the event that the county does go on their own, that the town should not be penalized, and we should not lose funding by virtue of the fact that now we're not regionalized. The town has followed in the same mission, the same path. The state supported this path by providing $175,000 for design. Federal government put an additional $500,000. We've put numerous hours, numerous meetings, and also thousands of dollars into this move. We haven't lost focus. We're doing what the state has supported. So why should the town be penalized because politically the county decided to go elsewhere? So it was received pretty positive by the governor's chief of staff, and the governor does not want to see us going separate ways. So in the event that it does, I have begun those talks with the governor's office so that we don't lose or jeopardize funding moving forward. So under matters from the mayor and council, I do want to advise the council, I think I've spoke to most of you of my meeting on several issues that I did, had about a 2-hour meeting with the governor's chief of staff on a variety of issues of the town of Taos. And pulling up my notes here. A lot of these issues were received very positive. The Estes Road intersection, That is to get the signalized intersections so that now that we're finishing Phase 3, is it Phase 3?
Yes.
Phase 3 of Estes Road, that they know that we're, that they put us on the schedule to put that signalized intersection. The chief was taking down notes and said that there is some dollars that they can allot to that. Siler Road intersection, I want to make sure that, they're supportive as they were preliminarily with their talks with our Public Works Director in purchasing the old Scheid building, condemning that, and as long as the town allocate local dollars and straighten out the road, they will provide the signalized intersection and make that intersection straightened out, a much safer intersection. Now, I would like to see if staff can kind of look at the minutes. I know when we approved the Smith's gas station, they committed to assisting in the realignment of Siler Road. The problem is we never asked them how much and asked them what that assistance means. Maybe they may come to the table and landscaping it or doing something that will beautify that intersection in our attempt to make it safe. So, if we can work on that. And then also Paseo resurface, to get the Paseo resurface from Cantu Hill all the way to the Witten Inn and hopefully all the way down to the town limits. And he realizes the severity of that. He thinks that it's embarrassing how the road is. I mean, it's in pretty bad shape. And he's going to try to see if they can get that done before the end of the year or before the construction window. I did speak with them about CDBG grant that was jeopardizing our timeline. He said he was going to do everything that he could to get that signed. Have you heard anything, Abigail, on that yet? I have not. Okay, so if you can send me an email, and that way I'll forward him. Simply just asking me what's the status. We have not heard from DFA. I will forward that to him. The Medicaid issue, I did bring up that since many of our constituents were calling out on the Medicaid issue and why funding was cut and jeopardizing a lot of jobs and the care to people that are in need. That it's a bigger issue, and they predict that indictments will be as early as next week because that was about to the tune of $36 million in fraudulent claims that they uncovered. And he gave me an example of one that a provider charged for the same patient in 3 different counties within the same hour. And so they need to do that investigation and get to the bottom of that. And I also talked to him about the Arts and Cultural District and concerns that the council has regarding allegations that we may lose funding. So Oscar, you met with the Arts and Cultural District along with the county. So that's all I have under mayor and council. And Oscar, if you could brief us of your meeting with the Arts and Cultural District.
Yes, sir, glad to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I met with the Arts and Cultural District yesterday at a regular meeting. I was accompanied there by the Assistant County Manager, Rick Bellis. And in preparation for that, we had come to some agreements about how the town and the county could work together to rejuvenate or to keep on track our efforts to have an effective business development or business support organization representing the historic district. And so, and also in preparation for that meeting, we reached out to the state and explained to them, well, first of all, the threat of the withholding of $72,000, which would have paid for a study by a consultant that they were going to choose, that they had already chosen, was not sufficient enough motivation for the town to then enter into a long-term relationship with an organization that we just had felt that was not prepared at this point anyway to deliver the services that we wanted. And then we put in front of them an alternative proposal, and the state accepted it, and this is the proposal. And that is that the ACD would then be merged with a larger board, a larger organization that would be the Main Street. And that Main Street organization would have like 4 points in its mission. One of the points would be arts and cultural programming, which is what the ACD does right now. The other one would be business retention. A third one would be the marketing of downtown or of the historic district. And then the fourth one would be just administration. And in order to address our concern about sole sourcing, that both our town attorney and the county attorney had, that organization would be a quasi-governmental organization, that this council would appoint some of the members, the county commission would appoint some of the members, and in that way we would be able to then contract, if you will, or allow that organization to speak for some of the resources that we provided to it. But there would be a fiscal agent, either the town or the county. We would be managing those resources, so those public monies would be further safeguarded that way. And so we presented to them that that's how we were prepared to move forward, and those would be the conditions of the resources that we would be offering to them. I can't tell you that the ACD accepted it because they didn't take a specific vote for it. But the reaction was not a negative reaction. They see, some of them see that is the salvaging of the investment that we've made to build that organization, and they also saw that as an opportunity for them to continue pushing for the cultural and arts programming that they're looking for in the district. Now, the other condition was, that we put in front of them, was that all the personnel of this organization would either be town or county contractors or employees, and in that sense, we would have a direct say over who the executive director was. The county's commitment was to bring on board as a contractor the current executive director of the Arts and Cultural District. That would not be on the county. I mean, on the town. That would just be a commitment that the county would pick up. And so again, those were the conditions we put forward. We're able to salvage some of the investment we made in building up that organization, and then move into directly and more confidently into the direction of a business improvement district or a business improvement organization that we had been hoping all along, and that was one of the points, by the way, one of the deliverables in the contract that we had with the ACD's executive director. Anyway, that's where it stands. I think we're not going to be able to move forward, and all parties to be able to have their concerns addressed.
Okay. Any comments, questions? Councilmember Beta?
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I believe when we go back and look at the minutes for the Smith's gas station approval, two of the conditions of approval will be, number one, that the Smiths would participate in the realignment of that intersection when it would happen. Secondly, I believe there was a condition of approval that Smiths would work hard to sell gas as cheap as possible. I believe Smiths has done that for over 2 years, but I also believe that in the last few weeks, they've betrayed us. Gas is now cheaper in Hispaniola, cheaper in Albuquerque, when before they were matching it. So I would like staff to address that with store management at Smiths to see if we can get them to once again break the gas monopoly and provide competitive gas prices. Now, I would agree, Brian James, that legally none of that is enforceable. They were to the best of their ability, but there's a goodwill effort that should be there, and I believe that's no longer there.
Okay. Comments, questions? Councilmember Silva.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of things. Earlier, we heard from a gentleman that spoke during the Citizens Forum questioning the traffic counters. So I think if we can ask staff to look into that and see exactly what that's all about, it would be nice to know so we can inform the community. And then the other thing is we had a great Fiesta weekend, and I think I appreciated the fact that our participation, the town of Taos' participation in purchasing more booths led to a little bit more space to maneuver, which is really nice. But I do believe that we need to get the Fiesta Council to really look at a few more of them booths that are selling stuff that is probably not appropriate for our children. And those are the items that I have.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? I fully agree with that. Councilmember Silva? Councilmember Gonzalez?
Mr. Mayor, I just have two two real quick items under matters for mayor and council. Interim chief, if we could do something, because school's coming up on us pretty quick, if we can get Officer Sanchez to maybe sit down on twofold. One, once the school year actually starts, with the traffic coming in and out of the high school and the backup that's created there. But number two, during their sporting events, because they are getting a bigger call at their sporting events, and traffic coming out of the high school after the games, which there's always plentiful cops after the game, but they're inside the gymnasium, and traffic getting out of there is extremely slow, and that light isn't real efficient. So if we could just maybe put somebody there at the four-way intersection and just move traffic so that everybody clears out of there as expedient as possible. That would be greatly appreciated. Number two, the fiestas were an extremely, extremely successful event, as they have been continually. And I too, this is going to be a work in progress. This was our first year walkthrough with regards to booth vending, and government hates to play a role into where we're restrictive as far as sales, but if it's to the detriment of our youth and to the community, then I fully support us removing some of the stuff that is sold there. So just for the listening audience at home, it wasn't that Fiestas is dwindling. The town of Taos did purchase additional booth spaces from the Taos Fiesta Council so that there was more walking room and it was a more pleasurable experience, and it's a foundation that we will continue to build upon and grow on. So again, kudos to town staff and kudos to the Fiesta Council for making another successful event.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilmember Abeta.
Thank you. And along what Councilmember Gonzalez just stated, Councilmember Gonzalez came up with the idea that where we did remove the booths along the front of the old courthouse, maybe a long row of tables with chairs for people to sit down, so that's just an idea. And at the Marcha de la Reina at the Sagebrush Inn, Mr. Northrup was seen having a very good time clapping away, so I'm glad to see Mr. Northrup enjoying the fiestas as the rest of us. That's all I had, Mr. Mayor.
Any comments, questions? Not. What is the pleasure of the council?
Move to adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second? And a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
It was also